Well, hello there. It's me, God's Comic Brad Stein. This is Brad Stein Has Issues with Comedy. Christianity and conservatism happen to collide in a cacophony of clarity. Today, we will be talking to a Michigan State Rep, Jason Woolford. It's his second time on Brad Stein Has Issues, a Michigan State Rep. So to represent Michigan is a challenge with their governor if you are a conservative. And we're really just going to talk about the whole idea of politics and con men, because I have reached the conclusions, my friends, that the Republican and Democrat Party are completely, utterly, and absolutely corrupt. Even the ones you are considerably committed to believing they're Christians serving God. I haven't seen it. Haven't seen them do anything but have wonderful meetings where they slambass some guy that's doing something crazy and zing him. Oh, he blasted. Oh, he ends so-and-so's career. And then they're never indicted and they never go to jail. So that means they didn't really take it seriously. So those con men in Congress are driving me crazy. This is Jason Woolford in Michigan, though, state rep. So maybe, just maybe, they have a chance to get a little bit away with more than the other ones because maybe they haven't been attacked by the demons that are running the show. This is a time for us to think clearly about life and America and where we're going and how we're going to get there, and will we survive or will we end up in gulags as Christians, conservatives? And if things go as they are unbaited, I promise you, you will. Unless you're not a true believer and you recant, and then you go to hell, but at least you're not in the gulag. I also have my producer and friend, I guess. He's my friend, but he's more than that. He's my son. Why? He exuded for my loins. I created him from whole cloth. He didn't exist, then he did, thanks to me. So I wanted to bring him on real quick so he could thank me for the incredible magnificence of creating him. And who wouldn't want to talk about that? Please welcome my son, Wyatt Stein. Wyatt, so glad to have you here again on Brad Stein Has Issues.
Well, it's great to be back.
Mm-hmm. Where did you go? Why weren't you here the whole time just waiting with bated breath to be back on the show?
Well, I had to edit the last show, and I finally got let out of my cage long enough to do this one.
Oh, okay. Well, listen, I'm glad that you're doing some editing with other shows and you're growing your career. I'm glad that, you know, as the numerous times I've told you, please don't let that dragging little floating icon thing that's on my camera go away, and you always did, but you didn't do it this time. And so I love that, and I love it, and I'll tell you why, ladies and gentlemen. So for those of you who are watching Brad Stein Has Issues, you don't see the things that I see, but there's always these little floaty things on this camera, because this camera has a monitor so that if I ever wanted to write my own text and then read it like they do in professional language, I have that ability. I just never do it because, Wyatt, I do things on the fly. Speaking of on the fly...
Yeah, you do things on the fly, like order a teleprompter with the promise of us using it every week and then never do.
We never do use it, do we?
And then complaining to me when the teleprompter that you wanted me to get is on.
No. It has this, and if it just was blank or had a color, but it has this thing.
Yeah, I know it has that thing going. You know why?
I hate that thing.
You know why?
No.
Because it's on. You want to know how I got rid of it?
How?
I turned it off.
So you're 5 years.
I literally pressed a button, and you couldn't do that.
Well, we've all...
You, Mr. Comedic Genius, Mr. I own a podcast, Mr. Oh, look at me, and he's defeated by a screen.
No, I charged you to
yes,
be in charge of the buttons.
Because clearly, pressing a button is above your pay grade.
Well, it's above my dignity.
That's what it... Yeah, dignity, says the comedian.
It's no different than...
Says the comedian, the modern-day court jester.
Which everybody loves and is amazing, fascinated by. Wyatt, I'm talking to you today, as you know, the state rep, and you did the editing, so you know who this guy is. I mean, not by name, maybe, or by reputation, because you don't follow politics. You're much more of an organic guy. You like granola, you like carrots, you like zucchini, you don't like noodles, but you do like pizza, but you don't like pizza with noodles. You do like potatoes, you don't like them mashed. So you have your own perspective. But one thing for sure, I don't think anybody can argue with this, is we're living in a world where there seems to be a lot of corruption and con men activity. Now, what I'm wondering, I'm going to throw this out here in the hopes that you fail so I can laugh. Do you know what the word con man derives from, what it actually means in full context, con man. You know what con means? It's a derivative of another word.
Condensation?
Close. That's for weathermen, but no.
Condiment?
No, that's for Heinz and all of its lineage.
Constant?
No, that's for mathematical nerds.
Convoluted?
Well, that would be your desire to try to figure this out and failing miserably, which is what I prayed for. And sure enough, God answered my prayers.
Conversation?
Well, that's what I used to think we were having until I realized it doesn't count if one side doesn't know what's going on.
Yes, it does. It's just called a monologue.
Well, it's confidence.
Oh, that was my next guess.
No, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
But here's the thing. Confidence, a con man is a confidence man. Now, what do you think? Let's just draw some conclusions. You're a smart kid. You really are. And you're not even a kid. So there you have it. You are smart. You're just not a kid. So what do you think they mean by confidence men? So what does that seem to imply if con men exist on this earth? What do you think they got that moniker, that's the name we reference them by. What do you think it was trying to say these people have to do in order to engage their craft?
Oh, you got to be confident. You got to sell it. You got to make everyone believe that you're real. Because that's what most people look at.
Well, you kind of were, I thought, going a little bit off a bit, but you retrieved. You said you got to really be confident about that. And I guess that's true to a degree. You're selling something. But it's for the person that you are stealing from. They give you confidence. They trust you that you are, they're confident that you are who you say you are. So by them giving you this attribute that you are, and they're confident that you're loyal, or that you're honorable, or you're moral, or that you're good, then they have confidence to invest money in you or to follow you along into whatever cult you're creating. And so that's why it's so devious, because confidence is something that's a beautiful thing, and they manipulate that to make money. Speaking of cults, White, if you were to create a cult, I don't know if you have ever been in one. You've been a Christian, I think, most of your life, so you maybe have avoided the cult scenario outside of the game playing, the role-playing games that you play, which is cult-like. It's weird. It's odd. You're up all night, red-eyed. You're in your underpants. A lot of cans laying around. You don't drink beer, but a lot of Dr. Pepper, a lot of bags of chips. So there is this really broken cult-like quality to.
What kind of cults have you been looking at?
Dungeon and Dragon folk. Cults. Falling for it, cognitive bias, seeing something that you are sure is true, and no matter what facts are given to you to show that you are off track, people can't, and everybody can suffer from that, right? So if you were to start a cult, what would your cult be like? If you were going to start a cult, like, okay, it's time for me to start my own religion, Wyatism. What would it consist of? Just off the cuff. I realize that it's something you only contemplate in the middle of the night when you finish D&D in your underpants. But I'm talking about now, just, with the little time we have here before people have completely nodded off. What kind of cult do you think you would create?
Okay, so it's very simple.
Huh?
It's the cult of paradox.
Oh!
We only meet when we're not meeting.
Mm-hmm.
You can't join unless you're already a member.
Oh!
And we have snacks every 29th of February.
Oh, nice. Now, does that mean that there are two of these out there or one? Like if there was one, because if there's two, then I could see it being a paradox. But if it was one, would it be a one-odox?
Well, no. It's like it is a pair, of course.
Yeah.
But they only meet when the other is already meeting then.
Or isn't there?
Yeah.
They only get together when one doesn't show up.
Exactly. And they're all supposed to show up as part of the charter.
Oh, and they never do, which is what they have to do in order to show that they've been there and not missed a meeting.
Exactly.
Wow.
And of course, you can't miss a meeting unless there is none.
Yes, which there never is, but that's the one you have to be at or you don't get to be in the club.
Oh, of course. most of our prospective members miss the tryouts because they arrive at the right day, which is the wrong day.
Yeah, the right day is always the wrong day, though,
Exactly.
isn't it? Yeah, and that's how you know that you're on the wrong day because it's right.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's I'm going to say that's clever that you pop that out of your head immediately. It almost makes me think if you've thought of this before, maybe as a game, you like games, and you wanted to be a game designer. So maybe this is kind of a game design element of a land that if somebody can walk into and you've already kind of had that up your sleeve and you say, this is the perfect time to get the illusion. I thought this up on the fly.
Oh, well, or maybe, just maybe, Mr. couldn't think of a good rebuttal 5 minutes ago, has a few good ideas.
Well, those were good ideas. I like the idea of the paradox. It's funny. It reminds me of there's a guy who's very famous, very funny comic of the 30s from the Marx Brothers named Groucho Marx. You've never heard of him because you've never heard of any cultural icon.
I think I've heard of him.
What did he look like?
He looked kind of like a...
Why, did you ever remember those glasses? Those funny...
Oh, yeah, the glasses, mustache, and nose.
Yeah,
that's where they came from. That's where I knew him from.
That's Groucho Marx. Yeah. So he was, and you should see, I mean, it's so funny about these. They had these amazing films. Duck Soup was one of the names. Horse Feathers was one of the names. A Night at the Opera was one of the names of their films. And there's a few, I think a Day at the Races, I think was one of their films. Anyways, these are from the 30s, son. I'm telling you, they hold up. Now, yeah, there's some archaic language in this and that. But it was so funny, so quick-witted, and there were all these different Marx Brothers. Groucho was kind of the funny, kind of sarcastic, dry-witted, clever one. Then there was Harpo Marx, who played a harp, but he had this floppy hat and this big trench coat, and he didn't speak ever, so he had a horn, and he'd go, ha-ha, to say something. And then there was Chico Marx, who could play the piano, and he was more like the con man-y kind of guy, played more like an Italian guy. So these guys were great, and you would have loved them. But the reason I bring them up is because I think to myself about the farce that is America now. When it comes to those who are, let's say, not voting, right now as we shoot this, it's a Monday night in March. What is it, the 12th, the 13th, 16th, something like that. I don't know. Numbers are not even real anyways. I mean, they're real, but they're abstract. And if you believe in true eternity, then I don't even know if numbers are attached to infinite. True, what's it called? Not true infinity, actual infinity. Absolute infinity.
Yeah,
I don't know.
absolute infinity.
But listen, if you have real infinity, is there numbers attached? Because you can't. There's nowhere to count to, because it doesn't end. So does infinity actually apply numbers to it?
Infinity isn't really a concept. Isn't a number. It's a concept in set theory.
Okay.
Of like basically a set that could contain a never-ending amount of things in it.
Right.
Like the set of every number. There's infinite numbers, so that would be a set of infinite things.
Yeah.
But you could also have a set of every number divisible by 2.
Okay.
There's also infinite of those. So technically, that's also an infinity.
Well, what I'm trying to understand, though, is that I understand what you're saying, and thanks for that clever knowledge that you seem to have in the math realm. But what I'm getting at is this: if infinity means the numbers never end, there's no ending, then it's almost like, what's the point of adding numbers to this system? Because they don't stop, they never end. There's no end point. There's no completion. We're done counting. So it's like, and you can't. I don't know if you stop at any one point and say here's a marker, then does that end infinity? Now it's been given a placeholder that says this is an ending point, so that's no longer infinite. So does that break down the infinity concept?
Well, even if you did put a marker to signify the end, you can still subdivide it into an infinite number of pieces. I think it's Zeno's paradox is what it's called.
Yeah.
The idea that you can't divide by 2 and get 0.
I think the greatest paradox that Zeno brought to the table was the fact that he was the only mathematician ever named with an X for the first of his name.
It's
Zeno
Z.
and
It's Z-E-N-O.
yes.
Yeah, so...
No, a paradox
good,
was...
Good job. Good job with that one. Yeah.
That's
Clearly you know what you're talking about.
That's the paradox. You pronounced it with a Z, but it was spelled with an X. And if you spelled it with an X, it should have been a Z.
You know what other letter sounds like a Z?
What?
A Z!
Okay. Okay.
You don't need an X.
Well, then why do we even have PH for F instead of just F? You know, why did we do all these things?
Because English is not a language. It is 3 languages dressed up in a trench coat, beating up other languages in alleys to steal grammar from.
Like Harper Marx. Well, he's in a trench coat.
Sure, yeah.
Well, listen, here's something that I learned a long time ago, and that is that it seems to me that we're living in a world where the clowns are running the show. That's why we're bringing on a state representative who's really in the game. But he's a Christian man and a conservative man, and he's legit. So I really wanted to dig down and deep and say, you know, what's really going on under the dark underbelly of political realm so we can figure out what's happening. But part of me doing that has always been me doing it as a comic, and I've tried to do it on stage. And more of my life, as you know, son, has become a spiritual additive, a Christian additive, because I believe it's true and it's the revelation of reality. So there was a moment when I was discussing this whole idea of where we've lost even common sense and how Christianity and that perspective can help return it. And if we lose Christianity, we lose everything, because it's the one that is the bulwark against any other false religion or communist, atheist religion that will take complete control, because God will be removed and thus people will fill a spot. So I did this at a church years ago, and it happened to hit the internet and do well. So I thought, I'm going to bring it up here. It's mine. I'm throwing it up here right now. And so in the United States, in a nation that we got so fat and lazy and rich, that we assumed that Christianity would always be dignified and honored, we're watching it slip through our fingers. And we do nothing. Why? Because we don't have the courage to stand up to people who say you have offended them. When did that become sin? I mean, when did that become sin? People that despise my faith try to use it against me. Oh, you Christians aren't supposed to offend people? I thought you Christians weren't supposed to offend people. I'm like, you know nothing of my religion. Christians are not allowed to maliciously offend people. I'm not allowed to think I'm better than you, because I'm not. I'm not allowed to think God wants me more than you, because he doesn't. I'm not allowed to think that God thinks I'm somehow superior to you, because I'm not. Trust me, the only reason I'm a Christian, it's the only religion that would have me. Tried to join the other guy. Can I join you? No bacon. I'm out. I'm out! Gone. What kind of God would deny me a BLT? I'm out of here. But a unique thing happens when you become a true follower of Christ. He says, you now are the deliverer of truth, not of a religion, not of a philosophy, not of an ideology, not of a point of view, not of a concept you've tried on, not some self-help guru thing, not some kind of ideology or some sense of maybe you should give this a try. He said, I am truth. There's nothing else. Anything else is a lie. Are you ready to speak like that in America? You see, that's the unique thing. You don't have to be a jerk for people to hate you as a Christian. Don't be a jerk. You already got a couple strikes against you for being a believer. You're supposed to be loved. They're going to hate you because of the truth. The enemy in this nation, from our Christian heritage and our religious liberties, the enemy is not politicians. The enemy is not Democrats or Republicans. The enemy is not conservatives or liberals. Those are just titles given to the true enemy of all nations: lies. Lie's your enemy. You have to do the most unusual thing you could ever have imagined when you become a true follower of Christ. And none of us are ready to do it. We think we are until we hear the cost. We talk about it and amen it, but when you have to go out of this place where everybody's listening and go where they don't like you so much, then you see, is my behavior affected? If not, ooh, who are you? I'm going to say something that might be a little sensitive to some of you people. And listen to me carefully. I don't care. So, these are the kind of things that I think about, son. And I have the tenacity to put it on my show, because why not? It's added bonus material. It's fun. I'm not seated. I'm walking back and forth. I had long hair, if you didn't notice. I've had longer and short hair over the years. But I was wondering about con men, because here's the paradox. You brought up paradox, which is a great word, because it was your cult and Zeno. So somehow we had two paradoxes in one podcast that wasn't supposed to contain any paradoxes, which, as you know, is a paradox. But I was curious about P.T. Barnum. You ever heard of him?
Nope, haven't heard of him. There's a lot of things that neither of us appear to be aware of today.
I've heard of Zeno, heard of his paradox. I just don't understand.
You know how to spell his name, but you knew him.
Well, guess what? P.T. Barnum isn't rough. It's P.T.
Yeah, I know how to spell his name. I just don't know who he is. It's the opposite of it's the opposite Zeno paradox. The anti-paradox.
So Barnum, P.T. Barnum, had this oddities museum, late 1800s, I think in New Jersey, and he's the guy that created the Fiji mermaid. So they would say, we found this dead, decayed mermaid, and it looked like weird mouth and fuzzy, but it had a fish's tail. Well, kind of out.
Oh, yeah, I know that. I know about the mermaid host.
Okay, well, they'd taken the tail of a fish, and they found a dead monkey.
Yeah.
They sold it. But he charged people money for this. He actually had a couple phrases like, there's a sucker born every minute. Mm-hmm. That was P.T. Barnum. His idea was, if I can get you to spend money, one of them, for example, you go pay money to go to the museum, and I just thought of this, so I wish I had gotten the actual information specifically, because it's funny. But he had you go to the different rooms to see the different crazy things, and there was a door that led to something, and then it was like leads to the milieu. It's like some language that nobody understood. This way to the milieu, something like that. I wish I knew the real words, but it was, that's interesting. They'd walk out the door, it would shut and lock. It was the exit. So basically it was saying this way to the exit, but he had a word you couldn't understand. So you're thinking, it's another display. So they'd walk out, the door would lock, they couldn't get back. So they had to go back around to the front and pay money again to get back in to finish the museum. So that's the kind of stuff this guy would do. He's a con man. But it was so funny. I mean, if you think about it, it's almost like audacious, like I gotta keep playing because this guy's great. But he was someone who eventually paired with two brothers called the Ringling Brothers, and they ended up buying together a circus, and they called it the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. So that was how that circus came into being, and that was P.T. Barnum. He was the ultimate con man. He's very interesting. I think I got a book on him if you want to read it, just because, but this is the point I wanted to make to you, son. There's something odd about rooting for the wrong guy. Like if you watch some movies, the anti-hero, the criminal has this idea of how to break into this bank and steal this money, and we're intrigued by it, and they get together, and they got the one guy that's great at cracking safes, and you got the girl that knows how to, ballet through a window and, contort her body so she can get through the what do you call it, the laser alarms. So they have all these perfect guys that move, and we start wanting them to succeed. We want them to be able to rob a bank, steal the money, and get away with it. What do you think it is about human nature, Wyatt? Is this somehow nefarious? Is this almost somehow some odd representation of our sin nature that we're kind of advocating for the person that's going to do the evil thing? Or is there something else to why we are rooting for the bad guy?
Look, I've seen Ocean's 11. I understand the idea of a heist movie.
Yeah.
And usually, from my experience, the point is the bad guys doing the crime often have a legitimate reason to do it. They're not just targeting a random bank and endangering the money of random people. They're usually targeting some rich guy who decided to mess with them in some way, and this is their way of getting back.
So you're saying that, and I'm sure this is true, actually, because if you think about these narratives, this is usually the case. It's because even though the guy's rich and it's his bank or whatever, he's not a good guy. He's not an ethical guy. So it's almost like he deserves what's coming to him.
Yeah, it's like, obviously it's still a crime to rob a bank,
Seems like it.
but if you get away with it and the guy was bad, it's sort of like that old saying, if a tree makes a sound if a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it makes a sound, did it really make a sound at all? But in this case, it's if you commit a crime against a large multinational bank and no cop is around to arrest you, did you really commit a crime?
Yes. Because you took money that wasn't yours.
Okay, well, wait. So I guess that solves the tree problem then, too.
Well, yes, it does, because what you could do is go get that tree, saw it up, and sell it for lumber. Put that money in the bank. Then they stole it. Suddenly you're like, wait a minute, I found the soundless tree. I made bank on it, and you stole it because you felt like for you to break the paradox of the tree falling with no one listening is so disturbing to us that we're going to charge you by taking away your victory. So there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle, Wyatt.
But just because you cut down a tree that made no sound does not...
No, it fell. It fell.
Fine. Just because you made a furniture out of a tree that fell and made no sound does not mean that the wood now doesn't make a sound at all. You can't market soundless furniture just because the tree fell and didn't make one.
Let me ask you this, though. What is your thoughts on that? This is a philosophical idea. If a tree falls, and it happens every day, probably happened, there, one just fell. When it falls, and it could be in Germany, Sweden, Antarctica, here, who knows, down the street, behind our backyard, who knows. But nobody's there. Did it make a sound?
Well, of course. And it's easy to explain why.
Please.
Because the propagation of sound is independent of an observer, meaning sound waves travel even if nobody knows that they're there. Now, I guess you could make an argument because of quantum mechanics that states that basically nothing is real until you observe it, but I don't really think the 17th century philosophers who came up with the tree problem really doing that back then. So.
Well, but here's the thing that I think does need to be discussed. And by the way, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but I've had some interviews with atheists before.
And their consensus on the tree problem?
Well, but here's the thing. The last one I have, it hasn't even aired yet. And the good thing is I kept my cool. But part of the premise of one of the things that I am trying to work through, and I probably need to do a bit more research on the rebuttals to make sure that there's not a flaw, but it's this, and my idea is this: consciousness, the ability to observe and draw conclusions. Once that is eliminated, once you're no longer conscious, then you didn't exist. You never existed. And I say that in that the only way you know you exist is if you're aware of it. So even if you could say, well, I'm going to die, so I won't know I was here, but other people will see pictures of me, or maybe they wrote articles. So there'll be an awareness, right? We know that there was George Washington, whatever. So no, he was alive. But what I'm getting at is from your perspective, you were never here because you have no consciousness. You have no way to even draw conclusions about whether there's an existence there. That's why the idea of God is so important, because if he's there, you need to be in his presence, because you're going to be, and do that in a holy way that only Christ can give you. So it's like, oh my goodness, I'd rather go into unconsciousness than hell. And hell is conscious, right? You're there, you know it, you're aware. So it's really an interesting I guess, comparison, because I think what you said is this: sound waves are produced when it falls. It has to, because it fell. Gravity still made it. It's kind of like saying, if a tree falls in forest but nobody saw it, did it really fall? Well, it did, because we're seeing it laid over and it used to not be. So gravity still worked even if I don't see it. Sound waves are created. But then we have to discover, well, what is sound? Is sound vibrations in sound, in waves? Is that what a sound is? Or is a sound something that someone can interpret as, ooh, I heard that? So I think that there is a distinction between the phenomenon that is created, that could induce what we would reinterpret as sound. That is created, but without the transistor radio to focus it in, it's not there. There is no sound, because there's nothing there to say, aha, sound, because the thing that fell didn't know it made a sound, because it has no mind to even consider. It doesn't know one way or the other. It doesn't even know it's a tree. It doesn't know anything. It definitely doesn't watch my podcast. It's a tree. Wyatt, so quit it. I know you send out emails to trees. I know you did a huge campaign to the redwoods. You figure that's going to get us a lot of attention. They're not paying attention, son. They don't get a mind.
Well, yeah, but that's why I make sure to actually use paper to print them out on, so that they'll have a reason to look at them.
Do you have any idea how cruel that is? It's almost like...
Oh, yeah, we get tons of hate mail. But hey, it's engagement. And it's funny, because the hate mail is also written on paper.
You know what? The algorithms are being processed. They are being manipulated. So you're right. It's just that, think about this. Paper is on, and they're little and thin. It's almost like you are sending these trees little skinned babies of their children to talk to them about things. And I can't even tell you how disturbing that sounded even to me. And I said it. Little skinned tree babies that we send to these trees to say, please watch the show. I don't know why you would bring that up, son. I don't know.
You're the one who twisted it into something weird. I was just making a basic joke about trees and paper.
You said we send them paper, and you know that paper comes from trees. You know what? We need to reduce the steam in this podcast. People watch right now are disgusted. They're weeping. So I got another clip I wanted to show you guys that I think you'll find interesting as well, because it also deals with the idea of con men. What's going on Earth? Do people make things up on the go? Do they change definitions? Do they try to control by convoluting what used to be logic and reason? Anyways, if you don't know the answer, I have it. That's why God's comic exists. Here, watch this. My son found this button as well today. Hey, it's God's Comic Brad Stein. Here's a question I need you to think about. Is it actually possible to shove a belief down somebody's throat? We use the term all the time, but can you actually shove a belief down somebody's throat? Talk about it down below. Listen to what I have to say, and let's see if we can get a little interesting conversation going without shoving anybody's belief down anybody's throat. You know, there's a new trend I noticed a couple of years ago, and I noticed it because that's my job, to do things for you. And it simply gains steam the further the left demands Americans implement its policies. Keep in mind that leftism has constantly used a phrase flippantly that not only didn't apply to the accused, but literally only applied to the accuser. That phrase was, "Don't shove your beliefs down my throat." If you think of what would actually entail to literally shove anything down someone's throat, it conjures up images of medieval torture techniques where a funnel was literally shoved into a person's throat and liquid was poured in until the hapless victim either suffocated or swallowed it until their stomach burst. But shoving something down someone's throat can only be done when someone is forced to consume something against their will. In the case of an idea shoved down your throat, the metaphor completely breaks down. Someone tries to pour something into you, and you either ignore it, walk away, or regurgitate back your own perspective, then nothing was shoved down your throat at all. Just the opposite, in fact. It was completely rejected. Meanwhile, to claim the premise that having to hear something you don't want to, but then demand someone hear your side instead, and to accept it or be banished from society, or at the least shamed, is to reach new levels of obstinance in regards to being oblivious to your own sin. But the use of language has always been the ultimate use of control, since whomever controls the language of a people controls the people. The dissemination of ideas and the demand for acceptance of such ideas, and equally worse, the banning of dissent, is the equivalence of intellectual slavery, as it only allows you to engage in it if your master so allows. Because I am such an ardent champion of the First Amendment, it used to be an interesting exercise for me to try and formulate how it might be possible for someone to destroy religious liberties in America. I emphasize religious liberties as opposed to the other First Amendment rights because it was the first as well as the most important. Not because I'm a Christian, mind you, but instead see it as the meta-narrative to the rest of free speech. The religious component represents your most sacred possession as a free agent, your right to conscience. You get to not only think, communicate, and believe what you choose, but more importantly, practice it as such in public and private. As far as I could imagine, there was no back door to destroying this right until I started hearing the prefaces being used in defining certain people's discussions in regards to moral behaviors. Because transcendent morals can only come from a transcendent source, those with deeply held religious beliefs are taught certain behaviors are outside God's created order and thus are sinful and deleterious to the culture. It was then that I got my first clue as to where the culture was going when I heard leftists utter these words in regards to certain religious objections to certain behaviors. They said this: "I'm not going to allow your religion to be used as a smokescreen for bigotry." Suddenly, the strategy was apparent. Make people's personal behaviors more important, more sacred than God's moral instructions to us. Since some don't believe in God, then you can't hold the religious objections against them, and voila, your sacred right to practice your religion is now redefined as bigotry. Not a different point of view morally, but literally defining your moral beliefs as, are you ready for this, immoral. In other words, the left has begun the devastating process of forcing their amoral perspective into cultural shaming and ultimately the loss of reputation, jobs, and freedom. So you're actually existentially affected by it, whether you like it or not. So their belief is being shoved down your throat. The main attack, of course, is towards Christianity for two main reasons. Number one, Christianity is the foundation for the moral and cultural way the West has seen the world for a couple thousand years. Thus, if you want to redefine norms, you first must destroy the foundations that were already in place in order to topple the edifice, and thus be able to rebuild in your own image, or at least the latest leftist golden calf. And second, Christianity is at the top of the little heap in regards to the intersectionality graph of oppressors versus oppressed. Christianity is always oppressive. Every other religion is always oppressed. The fact that Christianity alone created the concept that all humans are made in the image of God, which set the stage for every form of human rights to be available, from women's rights, children's rights, ending of slavery, and the end of putting one's ethnicity above another, notwithstanding they were going to use the commodity given to them, justice to all equally, derived from Christianity, as a cudgel to dismantle Christianity. Now, the very word Christian is used as a pejorative, like Christian nationalist or right-wing Christian, to now mean a catch-all phrase to define anything and everything that is bigoted, hateful, and intolerant. Can they prove their case, by the way? They don't have to. When was the last time you saw a leftist caught red-handed in a scandal or crime being prosecuted? Simply doesn't happen. They're immune to convictions, to reciprocity, and even to criticism. This is literally the greatest threat to liberty in the history of the U.S. One group has not only gained all power, all dissemination of information, all censorship capabilities towards those they disagree with, but are immune from prosecution. Whether you like it or not, unless there is an absolute relentless attack and destruction of this evil inequity, you will have no choice but to swallow what they're distributing or be destroyed. That's what it feels like, to literally have something shoved down your throat. Time for a universal regurgitation, my friends. Not a pretty metaphor to imagine, but true. Remember, this is God's Comic Brad Stein, and PC Free is your only shot at liberty. So now that we understand that the killing of baby tree papers and rubbing it in the face of the trees by sending it back to them is something that has to be stopped. Maybe we can, I was going to say send it to PETA, but they don't care. They only care about weasels. But what about, is there a tree version of PETA? We've heard of tree huggers, the hippies that think they're pantheists. They think that trees scream. And so they go, and since you can't hear the scream because they haven't fallen yet, and you only know that if it falls when nobody's there, does it make the noise, they scream for it, and then they look silly. But Wyatt, do you feel like there is a need for a return to authenticity? You know, you're a drummer. We've talked about this before. And when they first came out with synthetic drums, in a way, that's not real drums, okay? It's fake sounds. It's not the sound of a drum that a drum's supposed to make from a skin, not a baby, not a skinned baby tree, but I don't know what it is. What are drum skins made?
Animal skin. Well, originally. Now it's synthetic.
So you killed how many synths to get these things?
17.
Gee,
Per drum.
that's crazy.
Well, I mean, it used to be 80, but then they mass-produced it.
Oh,
Brought it down a bit.
but they sew them together, or?
No, it's like more of like a heating and cooling process.
Oh, so now they're making them go through that. Man, are they alive, or do they at least put them out of
Well,
their
they
misery?
were.
Wyatt, is there no some sense of putting them out of their misery? Like if you go to a farm where they kill pigs and pork, they kill them, they pop them in the head with this bolt thing, and they're dead. Do they at least get the polymers unconscious before they begin to stretch and kill?
Oh, of course. That would be inhumane.
It would be. Nevertheless, they spend the rest of their existence screaming out in toms and kettles.
You know nothing about drums, do you?
Aren't there toms?
There are toms, but
Aren't there kettles?
no. What's a kettle?
Kettle drum!
Listen. I've been a drummer for a long time. I've never smacked a kettle drum with a wooden stick.
Have you ever heard of kettle drum?
I've heard of them.
What kind of sticks?
You don't. I'm pretty sure you don't use sticks. Don't you just use your hands for that?
No, you use mallets.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, and hands is just slang term for mallets. Yeah.
Anyways, do you think that electronic drums are an authentic representation of what a drum should sound? You are a professional drummer, you get paid, and you are a very long-standing player of drums, and you like music. So you have the qualifications, more so than even I, to assess drum culture and drum dynamics and the drum issues that drummers contemplate on drum pages when they're not stripping dead baby trees of their skin when they're just doing it on the internet. But do you think that when you guys discuss this, that there's something a little off and wrong with using electronic drums instead of the skinned polythene thing that you now use?
Okay, so that's actually an interesting question, and I think it kind of just depend.
I thought it was falling apart. I'm glad to hear it was interesting.
You did fall apart in the end. That's why I'm here to take over.
Thank you.
So if we're just talking about electronic drums,
yeah, that go, but it's like like rubber or something. Like if you took away the sound, it'd just sound like you're hitting a practice pad, which is, I gotta be honest, rarely do you hear a practice pad as the sound for a good rock groove.
Well, yeah, but that would be like saying, "Oh, electric guitars, real guitars," because
no, that's just
an acoustic can't make the sound you can with like a wah-wah pedal or something like that. So the answer,
it's just an amplified sound.
No. It's not just an amplified sound. You have pedals that can create distortion and bonus effects that you cannot replicate on an acoustic guitar.
But they're coming from strings, which are real.
No, it is complete electronic manipulation. You are messing
But the sound comes from strumming a string, whereas with electronic drums, it's coming from hitting rubber, which is manufacturing a counterfeit equivalent of a normal sounding drum kit skin.
And a guitar that goes wah, 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 wah is not a counterfeit of a plucking a string. Am I going to answer this question, or are you going to keep talking about nonsense? When it comes to electronic drums, there were places where I think it's appropriate. Like, say you want to have better control over the volume of the individual drums. That's a genuine reason to use one, especially if you're in an enclosed space, the acoustics aren't good, and you don't want to have to deal with the echo of the actual physical drum bouncing off walls. I know I've dealt with that. So in cases like that, an electronic kit that gives you a lot more control over volume and other aesthetics is fine. If you are just doing it just to create a sound, that would be a drum machine.
Yeah.
Then things get a little bit more iffy, and I tend to lead more on the side of no. But there is an interesting case. I'm not sure if the story is true, but it is one that I heard a long time ago. There's a band that was started by a guy named Tosin Abassi. This dude played a 12-string guitar and was legitimately just shredding it. And he wanted to start a band. Only problem was, he could find a bass player just fine, but he couldn't find a drummer who could match his speed. So he used a drum machine to replicate it. And in that case, I don't have a problem with it necessarily because he had no other option. So
okay. I mean,
yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is authenticity. Like
authenticity does not have to do with the equipment you use. It's your intentions behind it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, because I suppose you could say that the first drum was like a hollowed out log, and then somebody took a skin and put over them. They said, "What's up? That ain't drums. Hollow out a log like we had to do and use a real drum, not some animal skin. What the heck?" So I suppose any new technology, maybe people get a little weird about it. But there certainly is a difference, son, in the sound of something that's warm and tangible, and the sound is literally from the actual hammering of a stick on a piece of skin or whatever it's made out of, as opposed to literally a created electronic manufactured. It's like Bitcoin. That's what it is. Electronic drums are the Bitcoin of a drum kit. Yes, you hear something, but there's nothing to trade in. There's no stick to break. There's no skin to puncture. It's all a con, an illusion, like Congress is right now, and the Senate is the Senate, because they sin constantly by conning us constantly. And how did I get full circle there, son? I don't know. Help me out of this. I feel like I'm drowning and I need some help.
Then get up for real.
Okay. So do you see what I'm saying, though? It's like Milli Vanilli. Do you remember Milli Vanilli?
No.
Okay. Well, they were these guys that won, like, what do you call it? Some kind of whatever award they give to people that sing. And they won. Grammy. Maybe it was a Grammy. Okay.
Yeah.
Two guys sang this thing. Come to find out, at one point, they lip synced the whole thing, their whole career. And there were some real great singers that were studio guys that they recorded it and they lip sync it. They just had this cool look. They had dreadlocks or whatever, and they danced or whatever. Completely fraud. They had to give everything back. And I think now this far down the road, one of the guys killed himself. I mean, it's what didn't end pretty, but it's go look up Milli Vanilli. You'll see the scandal. But nevertheless, they won a Grammy because it was a fraud. I'm telling you, electronic drums, Pat, like you set them up. At least, like you said, maybe if the guy has to hammer it, at least there's some human interaction that's causing the percussion speed and timing and whatnot. But if it's just a machine, it's a con. It's a fraud. It's AI of percussion.
I mean, yeah, but I'm sorry. This entire conversation just really, what angle are you going off of?
Well, here's the angle.
Look. At the end of the day, music is one example of many of natural versus synthetic. And I believe there's a case to be made for either.
Right.
You said that a synthetic drum can never be as warm and inviting as a natural one. Mm-hmm. Do you always want a warm and natural sound for what you're doing? Doesn't that limit your capabilities if you're only stuck with one flavor?
Well, they have, what do you call it, techno, or they have that kind of dance music-y, all electronically. Yeah. It is so, no, I don't like it.
I know you don't like it, and honestly, I'm not a fan of it either. But it is a legitimate form of music.
I guess.
And it does, I mean...
Listen, I don't want to be guilty of doing to others what I don't want them to do to me. People that don't like me because I'm a Christian conservative comedian will say things like, this guy's not even funny. And I always tell them, as I should, if you wanted to say, I don't even think this guy's funny, be my guest. Welcome to the real world of subjective desires, feelings, and emotions. But if everybody's laughing and having a blast and coming to see me, I'm funny. You just don't like what I'm saying, or it's not funny to you. So that subjectivity is not a declarative statement. It's simply your own perspective that you somehow have decided to impose on others. So I don't want to do that to everybody else. So you're right. If somebody's into the, whatever it's called, house music, tech, pop, rip. Matter of fact, I was in one of those. Remember that some guy had me record one of my lines from one of my album, and he turned it into some kind of, whatever they do. Anyways, so, yeah, I guess if somebody likes it, then it's good to them. To them, it's music. To them, it's danceable. To them, it makes sense. But to me, I want authenticity. To me, I want people being honest. To me, as a Christ follower, I want people that tell the truth. I want the truth to be the driving force of everything we do as humans. The truth is something that is so beautiful because animals don't have truth. They just instinctively go around, eat, drink, make other animals. Trees make little babies that can eventually be skinned for paper. But here's the thing. Jesus is the guy that said, how about if I become you because I made you, so I know how to do it, and I will authentically become and live the life of the human that I created and wanted to see play out and gave you the agency, the freedom to make it or break it on your own. I'll be alongside, love to participate, but I'm going to give you the chance to fail so that I know it's an authentic relationship. And of course we did, and he immediately said, now I got to become one of you, and he did. That was authenticity. This isn't a God that says, meet my standards or you're going to hell. He said, you can't, you failed. I know that because I made you. I know exactly what's going on, and I know exactly where you're going, but I'm going to fix it. I'm going to dimensionalize myself, become one of you. That's what makes Christianity so authentic. God becomes us. He puts himself out of the transcendent and puts himself in a material world that only in that state could we even see him. We can't see his spirit, not with the three-dimensional eyes that we have that interpret things with light waves and so forth and so on. He's a different form that we don't understand if it's contained to the material world. He transcends that. So that to me is authenticity. That's what Christianity is. Somewhere the truth, if we believe exists, has to be an absolute foundation. There has to be an absolute place that says this is truth and all truth derives from that. Well, Jesus said, I am the way, not that way, the truth. There is no other truth. If truth exists, it came from me first, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. Thank you for being that blatant, that thing. Come to me, you get in. Don't come to me, you go to hell. This is the hard reality of the truth of God when he revealed himself, not only in the created works that he made, so you can say, I really make things, and it's all encoded with the ability to replicate and do the impossible because an engineer is behind this, an architect has put it together, or I will even show you papers of insight, wisdom, prophecies, showing that I'm outside of linear time, showing you what it's going to look like when I become one of you, and showing you how to get the heck out of this sinful place and get home where you belong. That's the authenticity I want. That's why I speak about it on Brad Stein Has Issues. That's what it means to be a believer, but most importantly, to be a disciple, disciplined, to understand what it means to be a God follower and to tell others about it, but more importantly, to make sure your life lines up and constantly is prepared to be honed and chipped away and manipulated into what God demands so that people can see just a glimpse, just a little Jesus from you, because it's your turn to portray God. Fail, of course. Do it wrong, right. Counterfeits, no, because he inhabits us. We're just a poor representation because he's still stuck with sinners who are going to fail, but it's all he's got to work with. He loves us enough to say, that's enough for me. I am absolutely disgusted, sick to death of D.C., the corruption of that toxic environment. I want to see freedom happen again. I want to see liberty. I want to see people who do evil tried, and if convicted, punished. There has to be equilibrium. There has to be justice brought back to this country. That's why I'm tired of congressional hearings that seem to expose a CEO or a senator or somebody as clearly violating ethical laws or doing something that was illegal, but nothing happens. That's why I know it doesn't matter, and they're all in on it, because nothing happens if there's no punishment for sin. Then you're not taking sin seriously. God does, but not D.C. They have abandoned us. But we're still a constitutional republic, I guess, at least in name only. We are still, as the citizenry, the government, so maybe, just maybe, we can watch God help us retrieve some semblance of freedom again, but only if God Almighty is lifted up, if only the pastors speak from the pulpit what is expected of us. If the people who are called by his name repent, God will hear, and he will bring us a fourth great awakening. That's what we have to pray for, believe for, fast for, read for, and go forth into the territory he's given us and speak truth to life to those who need it desperately. One of the truth tellers that does exist. We've had him before, and I do believe he is on the right track. He's a true believer. He's a true conservative. He's in the Michigan State House. So he's got a little smaller version of it, but he still deals with the corruption. He still deals with the people trying to coerce him or make him abandon his ethics and his morals. But this is the real underbelly, guys. That's why I bring him on. So we can get one of us, a true believer, most people that watch me are true believers, or at least conservatives, to see what's really going on and how do we fix it and what's going on in your state, because that's a pretty blue state now with Whitmer as the governor. So how do you navigate that? that? How do believers get around these difficulties when people are completely the opposite of who we are? What do they do? How do they overcome it? How do we not compromise? And what can this do to be magnified in the meta narrative of Congress and Senate in D.C., where we really need, in a federal level, a return to justice, to truth, to morality? No con men, just men that we can have confidence because they've earned it. That's what we're going to talk about in this next, hopefully intriguing, inspiring conversation with a guy who has done the real work, and he's sticking up for those who believed he's exactly who he said he was. He campaigned on it. He's living it. Why? Because he's a true Christ follower. So yeah, I have thrown my lots in with him. I think he's legit. He's one of us. That's why he's here. So hey, enjoy, and I hope be inspired and enthralled by what could be in this country if we get men of honor in places of power. Please enjoy this conversation with Michigan State Rep. Jason Woolford. You know, when Brad Stein has issues, the most important thing is to get to the issues, figure out what the issues are, and to fix and redeem the issues if they've gone sideways. And they have, but where? Where do they go sideways? Where do we find ourselves at odds with reality in the United States? And of course, I care about the whole wide world, but the United States is my territory. This is where I'm born. I'm a citizen of this nation. So it matters to me that this nation is seeking truth and the foundations of the Christian ethic that created the West as we know it. Well, in order to do that properly, we set up a rule of government, and we have states that willingly decided to join a union and become the United States. But one at a time, those states have their own way of running things. And so we happen to have a state representative of one of those states. He's been with us before, but he's coming back because he loves me. And this, of course, is the amazing mitten known as Michigan. Please welcome back to Brad Stein Has Issues State Rep Jason Woolford. How do you do, sir?
Brothers, I'm doing great. So glad to see you again. A lot's changed since the last time I was on the show, so I look forward to talking about those. But yes, definitely good, and appreciate you and love you.
Well, listen, I hope you look forward to talking about those changes, because when you say a lot's changed, it always causes me some trepidation, because you never know what that change is, whether it's good or bad. So why don't we do this? Before we jump into these things, I want to do something that is important, and that is to establish who we're having a discussion with. Establish yourself. In other words, if somebody was to describe Jason Woolford, like, you know, who is this guy? What does he stand for? What is his presuppositional belief systems? What's his foundation? You're a representative of Michigan, but still a representative of the U.S. So how would you define yourself for people that are listening or watching or meeting you for the first time, so they know who they're interacting with?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, my name and money didn't get me anywhere. I come from a father who abandoned me. I lived in a trailer park, understood, learned the principles of living and giving as I earned the title United States Marine, gave my life to the Lord Jesus Christ, and then went on to run big business, and then oversee a global nonprofit where we've sent $500 million worth of free Bibles and Christian books to 180 nations. And then during COVID, seeing so many people willing the body of Christ, I decided to run for office. And so that paints a little bit of a picture of where I came from and where I'm at. I would like to believe, off of what people say about me, that I'm a man of authenticity, and with all my perfect imperfections, I'm a man of authenticity who loves the Lord, and my yes is yes and no is no. You had mentioned, you know, the government and those three branches that we have, right? And I think we're seeing a big problem, and this goes into what your question was we see the fourth fictitious branch of our government, the administrative state, that's out of control. And the fighter in me, the Marine in me, the patriot in me said enough is enough. And so that's when I decided to get in the ring and fight and become one of your representatives.
What do you mean by the administrative branch, though? The fourth pillar, which obviously is not supposed to be have anything to do with what we're actually supposed to be. But here we sit in a country that isn't really no different than any other country. There's always going to be people that want to take power, that want to take control, that want to run the show, so to speak. And in the last number of years, Jason, we've seen this sort of deep state thing, this idea that there's other machines running things that we never really knew was happening. I guess it's been around a long time, but boy, COVID really revealed so much about what was really happening as far as world organizations trying to influence this nation, steal our agency, our freedoms, our ability to be sovereign. Even as we watched immigration, where people were just allowed to infiltrate our country without doing it through proper channels. And so, a lot's at stake. Now, would you consider those breaches of our Constitution part of this administrative state you're talking about? I mean, explain exactly what you mean when you say that.
Absolutely. So, when we talk about our three branches of government, and I mentioned that fourth fictitious branch, the administrative state, I'm talking about just as you mentioned, but also those departments that fall under those governments, like the Department of Health and Human Services, Unemployment Agency, the DNR, the Attorney General. We have seen this in Michigan that is out of control. I am so privileged. I was able to get the freshman of the year lawmaker as a new incoming lawmaker because I'm chairing oversight committee, oversight looking for waste, fraud, and abuse. And I'll give you, if it's okay, a couple of examples of that out of control for fictitious branch. And that's we had the Department of Health and Human Services come in before our committee. They thought they were going to kill us with death by PowerPoint. Instead, on live session TV, we brought up the website where you apply for benefits. I used Governor Whitmer's address, a fake name. I was able to bypass the Social Security number, alien number, went on throughout the entire process, never getting denied benefits. And at the end, I was able to register to vote with a real address and a fake name. Wow. All because they say people like me that want to hold them accountable, of a fancy word of self-attestation. In other words, we're not going to allow people just to say, trust me, this is who I say I am, when we find things like this over and over again. And we saw that at the beginning of this committee, they talked about how great the $16 million website was. And then by the time we got done, they said, oh, well, we catch all of this on the back end, of course, which is ridiculous. So our Department of Health and Human Services, just in the state of Michigan, is $34 billion of taxpayer money, hard workers that are going into this program, and a majority of it is being wasted, frauded, or abused.
All right, so we've seen this not only in obviously Michigan, but in the federal branch as well. We've watched all of this abuse, this waste of money. That was kind of what Doge was trying to do, was say, where do we find money that has been wasted so we can use it appropriately? But here's what I'm just confused about. And so it's why I'm grateful to have representatives like yourself, because, you see yourself as kind of a blue collar, regular old American guy that just cares about classic patriotism and classic Americana. Americans and the freedom of speech, the beautiful thing about it is you can disagree. We don't have to all agree with the same thing. Obviously, what makes free speech beautiful and important is disagreement, not agreement. It's not hard to convince people to think like me if they already do. The hard part is to find, how do we agree to disagree agreeably? So, I love to see guys like you. You were in the military. You've been fighting for our freedoms in ways that civilians like myself maybe haven't. But I got to tell you something. And so I hope that maybe you can shed some light on this for people listening or watching this, because the frustration has really been, for me, and I'm just going to be very transparent and brutal. I've watched both parties completely abandon the American people. And it's clear, because if you have breaches of the Constitution or corruption, and it's proven, and nobody is indicted, and nobody goes to jail, then it's a lie. This is a game. There's nothing true about that. There's no justice. There is no righting the wrongs. There's no balancing what is necessary so that we can assume that this country is being run by people with integrity. So you see it at a state level, but clearly it's happening and has happened, who knows for how long. So I don't even know where my question is, frankly, on this, but help me understand this. When we see corruption and so forth, even being brought up in they have, tribunals and the congressman and the senator gets there and zings some guy or zings that guy, but nothing happens. Why should American citizens trust guys like you who are representing us to really bring, fairness and justice back? I mean, if we don't see it happening in real time. So show me what I'm missing here that has made your average American so frustrated with the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's a good question, brother. And from the outside looking in, I definitely had seen it that same way. But look, we have a president who I'm so thankful I've got to meet the president's cabinet twice now in Washington, D.C. for the sake of returning power back to the states. I've got to see someone who, with all of his perfect imperfections, just as I said, I have, all of us have. I saw a man who his yes is yes and his no is no, and he is really going after corruption at the federal level and wanting accountability on it. And we're doing that in the states, because it's the same plan from the devil, same plan from those that he possesses, oppresses. And so now, like in the state of Michigan, we have a speaker who's truly going after a real oversight committee and holding people accountable. And I think there's a lot of stuff that's actually being done that that main media will not pick up for that reason, that there is accountability. For instance, I'll give you a real world scenario. Our attorney general in the state of Michigan, we subpoenaed her to come before our committee. And we had her come before our committee, which she didn't come, by the way. So we're going to hold her in contempt, possibly. I've called for her to be held in contempt. And this story, there was a lady by the name of Cornack who was a caregiver for a woman, Mrs. Bird, and she embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was known. The police reached out to the attorney general, and we had emails saying the attorney general said, Mrs. Cornack is up for a judicial appointment, so let's bury this. Let's not pursue this. And so our work, we found this. This was a year-long fight. And just 2 weeks ago, Cornack has been brought up on charges of embezzlement. And this is important because she's very good friends with the attorney general. And Cornack was also the treasurer for the Michigan Democratic Party. And so we continue to see these things. And so we're starting to get these wins. I would say that's a big win, but as overall, these wins where we're showing that those in power, especially in the Democratic side, are overstepping their bounds. Money is being stolen, and we're continuing to fight. Brad, you got to remember, when an administration leaves, it leaves all of these people and departments behind, right? And our system, as awesome as it is, best in the world, is set up to where every 2 years I have to run. The senator every 2 years has to run. So you get in your first year and then you're trying to tell people what you've done. And a lot of times people aren't even paying attention or care to look. And there are things that are being done. And so I have some hope in that area, that there's that we have a president and we have state leaders now that are seeing that there is real corruption and accountability. I do believe a lot of it was softballed in the past, but this is why God is bringing people up like myself and others, where we're saying enough is enough and we're willing to fight, and we're fighting. And when you're ready, I have another story that just in the state of Michigan relates to $40 billion that we can talk about.
Well, then I do want to talk about that, but let's not sort of gloss over what you just said, which was that the treasurer, I guess you said, has been found to be what? To doing what that is considered corruption that you have actual evidence of? Because here's my point. If it's true, are you saying that they did something that was unethical, or they did something that was illegal? And if it's illegal, why aren't they going to jail like the rest of us would happen if we were embezzling things from people? This is why Americans are sick of it. Nothing happens to these people ever, ever. Why is Fauci not in prison? Seriously, for people that died because of his lies. No, this isn't wring our hands, fiddlesticks. No. What has happened when evil isn't held accountable? That's why I think Americans are fed up, because we feel powerless. We don't get out. You walk into January 6th, you just walk into a building that somebody opens the door for, you go to prison. But boy, if you do anything else, like, I don't know, go after ICE agents and try to hinder them from bringing people, nothing happens. That's how we feel. So let's be specific. Okay, so what happened to this, or is happening to this treasurer that you said you've caught in some kind of, I guess, illegal or unethical? You tell me, what did you catch, and what's happening to them for what they've done?
Yes, illegal and unethical. Whatever adjective you want to put in there. So she has now, since our oversight committee in the state of Michigan has now charges of embezzlement have been brought onto her, and we're seeing a pattern with the Attorney General that this is a common theme. Where they've hid things. So, for instance, the Attorney General, we have an email her stating not to prosecute this lady because she's up for a judicial appointment. And we're seeing this time and time again. And so we're literally working through that process. Cornack, the former Democratic treasurer, has been by the police brought up on embezzlement charges. And that's just in the last month. And that was a year-long fight on just one area. So we are seeing and holding people accountable. I would also say that it frustrates me that more people aren't going to jail quicker. But I do say this, and this is so important, that we are showing the corruption and the wickedness of these people greater than ever before. And people have to take notice of that while we're waiting for prosecution, while we're fighting these battles, to know that this is not a two-sided thing in the sense of the corruption that we're finding. And so I'm there with you, brother. It's a continued fight for sure. We have the similar situation that's going on. The unemployment agency, for those that are watching, those that, your employer pays in, and should you have to go on unemployment, they pay you, right? Well, during COVID, the state of Michigan and every other state around, state of Michigan got $40 billion. Of that $40 billion, it came with a rule from the federal government that you had to put a fraud detection in the back of the website. And here's how tricky our administration, the governor in the state of Michigan and her team is. The federal government said you have to have, with this 40 billion, a fraud detection on the back of the website. Well, the feds didn't put in there that it has to be on or off, because it would make sense that it has to be on. So they turned it off so that they could pay people faster. So under our oversight, we found that 10 billion of that $40 billion went to people that were 15 years old and younger, the incarcerated, those in a convalescent home, and those over 100 years old. And so this is a fight that my oversight and our main oversight have been fighting for 1 year. We've uncovered this 10 billion. We're looking into and asking the department head why and who turned off this fraud detection button. They are not giving us the information. I just got back from DC meeting with the assistant AAG Harmeet, the Department of Justice, showing her and telling her about our findings, and there's going to be accountability there as well, because someone chose to turn off that fraud detection. And this is the thing, and I'm unapologetic about saying this. There's a lot of Democrats, they're just not smart people, but I don't understand how good they are, how they're so good at stealing money and converting or not getting held accountable. And it takes me back to that religion and politics are both spiritual issues, because it makes no sense. And we're going to continue for your question or for your statement, because I feel the same way, is continue to fight and continue to expose these things and bring accountability. And I think that's the biggest thing that's different, is that we have a president that wants to go after it, hold people accountable, and then we have especially in our state, people that also want to get results, and so we're fighting for that.
Well, and God bless you. I mean, I don't think I can be more transparent about the frustration and, frankly, the lack of optimism I have with the process. And brother, you're a Christ follower. You're one of us. You're my brother in Christ, and I trust your integrity and your virtue, and know that you're a man of honor, and are trying to bring that back to the government system here in Michigan. And of course, that applies to the United States in general. Each state is a representative of the great, our nation, and so. This isn't an indictment on you. It's just a frustration, and you're trying to do the right thing, and clearly have uncovered some important things. So obviously I want to have some optimism, but it's just hard to do, frankly, after we've watched the institutions in the corruption that seems to be so much instilled in them, to no longer trust them. I mean, we lost faith in the CDC. Based on what they were doing with the corona, when physicians were thrown off the internet because they said, I think this virus isn't being handled properly, that we're overreaching if we're not letting kids go to school. I mean, things that didn't just have some political perspective, but it was causing distress and destruction in our nation and for our kids. So again, I don't want to take it out on you. You're the good guy, right? You're one of the good guys. Yeah. But I guess the truth is, brother, the buck stops here. You represent us. You are in the game. You're the one that actually goes to DC and actually talks to these people. So we feel like grateful for what you're pursuing. But boy, if we don't see results, it just feels like it's either nobody's taking it seriously, or there's no way to overcome the corruption. You talk about having a president that cares about exposing these things. And yeah, I'm grateful for that. But what happens when he's not president? What happens if we get another Barack Obama in, or Joe Biden? Then what happens? We go back to lawfare. We go back to having everybody that voted for Trump now being arrested. I mean, this is why we don't know how to even assess our rights anymore as Americans, and how to even be able to feel confident that the good guys win and the bad guys don't. So help me understand the process. You get to DC, you talk to these people. Do you see in the machinery, you're behind the curtain, right? And but do you see people approach you and try to sort of, I don't know, throw a few carrots your way, like, we can help you, but we need you to do that? I mean, do you see the game being played out, or do they know you well enough to know, well, this guy, we're not going to be able to infiltrate? You know what I'm saying? I mean, is there really that kind of a machinery taking place to a freshman who gets into DC with all these great ideas, and somebody comes up and says, hey, buddy, here's how you're going to vote, or we have these pictures of you with these underage, all these Epstein things. So explain to me, what is really happening over there that the average citizen isn't aware of?
Yeah. I think to your point, that they see and they hear the type of individual or man that I am, only by the grace of God. So I don't see that. I thought that there was, there's a lot of stuff obviously that goes on, but I think when you're dealing with somebody that has character, and people know that's not even an option or something that they present to you. I think also, Brad, I wrote down earlier this morning after praying, I wrote, sometimes it's not even what we do as Republicans, conservatives, believers in this game, in this role of politics, is what we stop. And we have been able to stop so many demonic, terrible things by taking majority in the House. Uh, uh, in the state of Michigan, we had a Democrat trifecta, and because we took the House back, we were able to stop radical, furthering of killing of babies, stealing of our money that was going to. In the state of Michigan, our budget is $81 billion. It's one of the highest there are in the states. We found through our budget process that they were giving tens of millions of dollars to homo hip hop for children. They were giving money to homosexual male quartets. And these were all appropriations, giving people money. And so, just as a reminder, something that we stopped was we put in that if a representative, a senator, somebody puts in a request for money to go somewhere, their name has to be on it. It has to be transparent, and the public has to be able to see it. And just off that, we have saved billions of dollars, and more to come this next year. And so there's a lot of stuff that we stop. I think we're coming to a time where it's not business as usual. This is my first year in office, but it's from those that have been around. They're saying it's not business as usual, that we're really trying to go after. It sickens me. Democrats, Republicans before now, just sitting back and not bringing accountability when they could have. And I think there's a lot of reasons why they can't, a lot of reasons that they wouldn't. But I think that tide, I know that tide is changing because God is raising up so many people, like us. And, COVID, you talk about the overreach. I believe that was one of the greatest attacks on Christianity in the history of our world. And I say that because in the state of Michigan, we had a governor that said you can't go to church. And then when people somewhat pushed back, she said you can go to church, but you can't sing. Now, Brad, Hindus, Buddhists, followers of Islam, no one enters into the presence of their God through praise and worship except us, Christians. So we had a government telling us that we could not sing and get in the presence of our God, and if so, that we were going to be held accountable. It is so wicked. I believe in my whole heart that religion and politics are both spiritual issues when you boil them down to their finite. If you could see the pictures to the left of my wall, I have a picture of George Washington praying at Valley Forge. And then on the right, I have him fighting on the Delaware, crossing the Delaware, praying and fighting. And in the middle, I have John Peter Muhlenberg, preacher during the Revolutionary War, preaching a message out of Ecclesiastes that there's a time for war and there's a time for peace. When he got done preaching, he took off his preaching robe, and underneath he had the first Army Brigade uniform on, and him and 300 members of his church were the first brigade to fight. And because we were praying, because we were fighting, and we have clergy, Christians standing up and fighting, it formed those declaration, the Constitution, all of those things. And that's what we got to get back to. The devil has been so excited that leaders in the church and we as the body of Christ have been absent from this, and he's taken it over, and we're going to take it back.
So you would say that it is a actual existential attack against Christians and Christianity in general in the United States. That's your perspective as a Christian. Of course, people can say, well, he's a Christian, so he's going to be biased. But you're saying that you believe it is, in fact, an attack on Christianity in general, which I certainly would agree with, because first off, Christianity's founder is the only one that ever proved that he was God, and he claims to be the truth. So everything that comes from truth derives itself from Christ, who was said he's the way, the truth, and life. And so, do you feel like you have seen real pushback and hatred towards Christianity in general, or has that been more of a personal experience against you, or do you do see the spiritual battle at stake in the West, I guess, in general, but also certainly in your own, maybe you might even have some stories so Christians understand what's at stake here, that this isn't hyperbole. This is legit, that hell is here and it's angry.
Absolutely. I got a perfect one for you. When I put forth my bill, which passed the House, to keep men out of women's sports, when I read that speech, which I would love for you to share, when we were on the floor, when I was on the floor giving my speech before we voted, as I was speaking, we had two Democrats that were literally manifesting, and I don't care if they come back on me on this, but they were manifesting demons right there on the floor. They were moving and hissing like snakes while I was simply saying that men couldn't play in women's sports. And so I had legitimate death threats on my life, all because of why we were saying that someone who was pretending, some pervert man pretending to be a woman, that he couldn't play against women's sports. In women's sports, I had Peyton McNabb and Riley Gaines there. Peyton McNabb, a 15-year-old girl, took a volleyball to the face, has permanent partial brain damage and partial paralysis for the rest of her life because no one stood up. And I'm also talking to dads. Dads, where are you? How are you not sticking up for your kids? No one was willing to stick up for this girl. She took a volleyball to the face from a so-called quote unquote girl, transgender, who spiked the ball in her face. And while we were in committee, one of the Democrats said, you can't blame them for having a good serve. So I'm telling you, I see this. I see them trying to blaspheme the name of God. There's a video where we were in committee and they mocked the Immaculate Conception, and I broke committee rule. And so I'm saying I definitely see this full on. God says to defend the fatherless, relieve the oppressed. And so I see it in money, them taking our money at a federal and state level and doing bad with it. That's our job. I see them killing our babies. I see them over-regulating, stealing our constitutional freedoms, like you said. And so, yeah, the fight's on. I'm ready. I see it. It's demonic. And there's no other way to describe it. It makes no sense to me.
Well, and I agree with you. But, what's really odd is it appears that even secular people have been recently sensing that something is off, that they don't understand it. And it really came to a head at the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We saw a lot of atheists say, I don't know what's going on, but I need a Bible. I mean, it was weird. And obviously, because martyrdom is the, God has always used as the cement for his body, for his church throughout history for some reason. And it's a mystery and it feels unfair at times. I look at Nigeria, where Christians are being butchered. Nobody's doing anything about it by Muslims, of course. And all we say is, look, just protect these people and their human rights like anybody else. But I just found it interesting that, this spiritual realm seems to be so aggressive and frankly, Jason, more obvious, I guess. More, I think it's been surreptitious throughout the years. It's a little bit more under the current, under the radar, subconscious. But now it's almost like blatantly saying, this is who we are. We're here and we don't care. We're going to sacrifice babies. We're going to eat baby. I mean, crazy things that is almost unimaginable that these things are said in public without, pure outcry. So here's what I'd like you to help my listeners and viewers right now. So you're a Christ follower, you're a Christian man, so you have the Holy Spirit involved you, you have that spiritual discernment, you're in you're a state representative, so you're in the political realm. In my lifetime, the thing that's been kind of a double-edged sword for my career, which turned into a ministry, was that I believe that truth should be spoken at all times, that it's sacrosanct, that the truth is not only the foundation of my faith, but it's the barometer. Free speech is the barometer for free nation. How free you can speak is how free you are as a nation, because whoever controls the words controls the people. And I've had in my lifetime over the years, because I use Christian worldview as my commentary as a comic, and I'm the only one doing it in the United States that does it this way. I've had some churches now and again say, we don't want to bring you in because we like you. Oh, we love you. But there's some liberals in our church that would be offended, so we don't want to offend them. And I said, well, first off, if you're a church who makes policy based on 2 or 3 progressive leftists, then you're a compromised church. So I don't want to come to your church because you're heretics. So I'm not interested. Thank you so much. But here's the nomenclature they use that I want you to address, because you'd be in a better position to do that with more authority than me. I'm just a comedian. They say, we don't want to get political. And I say to this church, well, first off, let's define terms. What do you mean by political? Am I getting in saying vote Republican, or, vote for Donald Trump? Or no, I'm not doing rallies for political candidates. I'm talking about the culture. I'm talking about behaviors. I'm talking about morals. That's the point of the church, is to say what is moral, what is not. What does God expect of a nation? What does he forbid? We're supposed to redeem the culture. We're Christ followers. So help us understand, as a Christian man who's really in politics, where do you see the church in America missing it in regards to what they need to do to affect their local communities in towns and states, and is expected of them as a Christian, as opposed to some kind of false perspective that politics is outside the realm of our religious beliefs. Help correct some pastors or some churchgoers right now who are not affecting and defending our faith because of this sense that somehow religion and politics shouldn't intertwine.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I see we live in a nation of peacekeepers, and there's the problem. God says, blessed in Matthew 5:9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. God has called us in religion, politics, and every area of our life to be peacemakers. Peacemaking is a messy business. I have been attacked from the back. I've had death threats, all of these things, because I choose to be a peacemaker. We saw Charlie Kirk, a peacemaker. It's a messy business, holding people accountable, speaking the right way. We've all too often are seeing peacekeepers that are running things in the church, running things in politics, and there's enough of that go along to get along, creating a false sense of peace because they're afraid to stand up and do what's right. I tell my friends that are in the ministry, I said, look, before you do a church, build out your building, do a message on fornication, do a message on tithing, and preach on homosexuality. And then when you're done, you can let me know if you need to raise the money to grow the church. We're doing these soft messages as a whole that are just feel good things to people because we're afraid to get into these issues. And that's where God has called us to be. We've seen it throughout our history. We see it in those that wrote the Declaration, the Constitution. God's word is there. We can't back out of it. And everyone says, well, God loves everyone. And he of course, God loves everyone, right? But what is the difference between America and other places? Like you mentioned, Nigeria. We have sent in our missions organization that we have called Mission Cry, we've sent $500 million worth of free Bibles and Christian books to 180 nations around the world. A few years ago in Nigeria, they asked if they could get a box of Bibles because people were being martyred, killed, beaten for their faith, for a God they can't even read about. And so instead, we sent 90,000 Bibles and Christian books there. But I use it as an example. Nigeria, China, all of these places where those people love God just as much as we do as Americans, but they have a rougher way. Their life is not as good. And so the question is, what's the difference? And that is, you and I, Brad, and pastors, we're living off a remnant that was left before us of this goodness. And it's now our turn to pick up that mantle again and be peacemakers and fight back. And so I'm praying that the church gets involved. You know, I couldn't believe, and then I'll be quiet. I couldn't believe that when President Trump got it so that the Supreme Court ruled on abolishing Roe v. Wade and returning it to the states, in most churches, because I checked, they didn't even mention it on that Sunday morning because it was political. Shame on the body of Christ and those that are leading that are not willing to stand up.
That's what I said. They're compromised or cowards, both of which are a disgrace to the body. You know, when I'm going to be honest. So in 2016, when Trump won his first term, you know, they had a lot of the social media memes of leftists, you know, breaking down, and we're all laughing at them, and, you know, liberal tears, and we mocked and ridiculed, whatever. And then the election was stolen in 2020, and then he's reinstated, you know, a year ago. But I'm going to tell you something. I had a whole different perspective. I really did. When he won again, I didn't see it as a cause for celebration. I saw it as a reprieve that God has said, listen, you can't continue to kill your babies and think I'm not going to hold you accountable. You can't continue to mutilate children's genitals and call it healthcare and think I'm not going to hold you accountable. You can't continue to have divorces in your church and not hold it as equally evil and dark and broken as people living together or any other kind of relationship, sexual relationship, that is not something that I have designed for the best for humans and how I expect you to behave. That the church has to stand up now, and the pastors to say, here's what I say about morality. Here's what God says about divorce. Here's what God says about marriage. Here's what God says about gender. Here's what God says about abortion. Here's what is expected of believers if we are going to be shown any grace and mercy from God. But the church has to do it. If we're going to have a fourth great awakening, we know that when God says that, you know, if my people, you know, who are called by my name will repent. He wasn't calling non-believers. He said, those who claim to be mine, you're the ones that need to repent. You're the ones that fall on your face and say, have mercy. And then we will go into the marketplace and serve you, because even the church is not a place for evangelism. The church is a place to equip the saints to go into the marketplace and evangelize. That's what it was for. Church is our sanctuary. It's our place of respite. And like you said, when they said, oh, you're unessential, it was a direct insult to God. So I just find myself, you know, trying to navigate a weak, superficial church in America that is the weakest of all Christianity worldwide, that is the most ineffective, that is the most inefficient, because it's never cost us anything to be a believer. Well, it is now. It is now. And it should be. I don't want it to be, but let's just be honest. If we are not doing what God demands of us, why would we get off the hook when our brothers and sisters in Christ worldwide are suffering countlessly because of their faith? So talk to me a little bit about how you think citizens, Christian citizens, can be more effective based on what you've seen when it comes to, for example, helping guys like you who are trying to make a difference, who are trying to end corruption, who are trying to bring peace, who are trying to bring back God's standards. You know, what from your unique perspective as a Christ follower, citizen, and politician, can the average citizen, who is the government, we're a republic, you're not my, you know, you're my representative. You don't rule me. You just take my vote into Congress and try to make a policy that's based on what we've asked you to represent. So tell your average Christian how they can be more effective and more proactive in defending religious liberties, free speech, and a moral America.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, understanding what the Constitution says, what the Declaration of Independence is, and then also what does God have to say about the situation of being involved. It fascinates me as a believer and as a representative, where I'll have people that'll have like a "Don't tread on me" sticker on their Facebook, and then Bible verses, and then they're asking me to do something that's unconstitutional because they want their way, right? Of course, I'm getting it more on the left side, but the point is that people have to understand first and foremost, what is our rule of law and government in America? What is our involvement as believers, and what does God say about it? And then be involved in the sense of, so many representatives and senators, they're fighting every day. It's like preachers in a way, Brad, right? Like we're and I'm both, whatever, where all you're doing is hearing the bad from both sides, right? You're only hearing the why aren't you, I'll say it like this. I passed, we got the keeping men out of women's sports, breaking that down so our little girls women don't have to be in locker rooms naked with men that are perverts, and a whole bunch of other things. And then as soon as that passed, people on both sides. So what about this, and this? And I'm thinking, man, we're fighting, we're taking background. So I would say, uplifting those arms of those being an Aaron and a Hur, or for those that don't understand that, coming alongside and being an encouragement to these people that are willing to fight, these people that are stepping into that arena to be peacemakers. And then taking the corruption, the wickedness back to the leadership in the church, and saying, how come we're not talking about or standing with these people that are standing up for our little girls, that are trying to be good stewards of our money, all of these things, and bringing accountability back to the church to talk about those things that make a difference. We are where we are in America, and where we were up until about 6 years ago, of where we're at, just as you said, because of the lack of preaching and the involvement in all of those seven mountains of God.
So when we talk about Christianity, it's certainly the most egalitarian belief system in human history. It's certainly given the most wealth, the most protection. I mean, human rights comes from Christianity. The whole idea of being intrinsically valuable, made in the image of God, that was the monotheistic version of theology that had never existed before, and that's alone gave us the opportunity to have freedoms, women's rights, children's rights, human rights. All these came from the Christian view that we're all from the same Father, thus we are all equal. Intrinsically, it doesn't mean everybody gets the equal results. It doesn't mean everybody's going to have the same gifts, and some people come from more difficult situations and are going to have a more difficult road. That's just. But Jesus said the poor is always going to be with you. I mean, it's a corrupt world, and not everything is fair. There'll be a justice someday for everybody. But in the meantime, we are here to fight. But, there are other religious beliefs, and Christianity has this odd double-edged sword in that it does allow dissent. Christianity has to allow the agency of a human to flourish. In other words, God says, if you want to go to hell, I'll let you. That's how much freedom he gives the human soul, that he wants you to be so free, and he wants his relationship to be so pure that he wants you to choose him, and he's not going to demand it, even to allow his child, who he loves, to walk into hell. He's going to let that happen because that's how free he wants you to be. Well, not all religions do that. Not all belief systems allow that. Certainly, atheist-driven communism doesn't allow you dissent. Matter of fact, atheists hate, and communism hates Christianity more than anything, because the Christians will not worship the state. We worship God. But we also have Islam. Now, Islam has made quite an inroad. Certainly we see in Minneapolis and in Minnesota, but also in Michigan. And like I said, we have this odd, this odd sort of reality that God has asked of us, and that is to love your enemy and pray for those that despitefully use you. So in a Christian nation, we allow Muslims who are not Christians and certainly have a whole different belief system, we allow you to worship here, even though it's the antithesis of our belief system. Whereas if you go to a Islamic state, you're not allowed to do those things as a Christian. So have you seen some influence in Michigan from Muslims, and that you feel is not maybe reciprocating the freedom that Christians give them? And if so, how do we approach them in a way that is Christ-like, but has to speak about, you know, freedom for everybody? I mean, I just, it seems to be something that is certainly causing a lot of division right now in America. And it's a sensitive topic, but it has to be discussed because it's an antithesis philosophy to freedom. So how do you approach those of those different belief systems, especially those who are trying to make that the law of the land? I mean, I know it's a lot to say for somebody who's representing their state, but I think it needs to be addressed because it is causing conflict that we have to address. So how do you go about that?
Yeah, absolutely. First, we can definitely address it because Michigan, outside of the Middle East, has one of the largest population of Muslims and followers of Islam, and that's right here in Dearborn, in Michigan. And before we go down that road, I'll say when I was campaigning, I was at an event and forum, and a girl got up and asked me, and it was a legitimate, real question. And so I applauded her for that. But she got up and she said, "How does somebody like you represent somebody like me?" And I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, what am I?" She's like, "You're an alpha male. You're a Christian." You know, she named off a couple of things. And I said, "Oh, well, what are you?" And she said, "I'm an atheist lesbian." And I said, "Great news." I said, "I'm your guy." And everyone was, quiet, and she was listening. And I said, what I mean by that is I said, I wore a uniform to give you the ability to have sex with whatever and whoever you want. That'll be between you and God. I said, and I also serve a God who gives you, to your point, Brad, the ability, if you so choose, want to go to hell, do whatever it is that you do. But it's those belief systems of Christianity and no other religion that gives you those freedoms.
Yeah.
There is no other religion. And this is what I try to explain to atheists, Democrats, all of these people that want to suppress Christianity, our Declaration, our Constitution, is this religion has made it possible for followers of Islam, Hindu, all of these places to come and set up their mosque, their whatever it be, because of the God it is that we serve in this country. As it relates to Muslims in Dearborn, the mayor, this was, I don't know if you saw this a couple of months ago, but they were literally naming a street, the mayor, a follower of Islam, naming a street after a known terrorist and a longtime Dearborn resident, Christian, may or may not have been a Christian for all I know, but he came forward to the council and said, "I have a problem with this, Mr. Mayor. We should not be naming a street after somebody that was a terrorist." And the mayor went off on him, said that he's going to throw a party when people like him are escorted and move out of Dearborn. And so what we've seen down there and what we're seeing across the nation is they're using our system of a republic, a democracy, against us. In Dearborn, I know a Christian brother who went down simply being kind during a fair, handing out tracts, not being disrespectful. He was abused, hit, and then when he went to the police, who happened to be Muslims, they arrested him for being down there and exercising his freedom of speech. And so we've got a real problem in this area. And I'm definitely against them trying to incorporate Sharia law in the United States of America. And enough is enough when it comes to those types of ridiculous behavior.
So you just said that a man went to a Muslim parade or something event I guess he's a Christian, handing out tracts. I don't know if the tracts were the difference between Christianity and Islam. I don't know what they were, but nevertheless, you said that he was abused, and we've seen this a million times, so that doesn't shock me. But you're saying that he went to the police because of assault that he has proof of, I guess.
Yeah, they were there. They were there watching this.
And you have it on film.
Oh yeah, that's
Okay.
on film.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a few years ago.
Okay, so the assault is legit. It's not something that was manufactured. And he went to the police, and the police arrested him. What was the charges?
I'll have to go back, but basically, interrupting, being belligerent, if I'm not careful, they'll come back and say he didn't know the exact charge. So I don't know what the exact
Well, I'm not, and I'm
charge
not,
is.
it's obviously not.
But he simply was arrested for exercising his freedom of speech and talking about it.
Well, and please, realize I wasn't trying to put you in an awkward situation. I just felt like this is kind of what.
Oh no, I know.
Yeah, this is what I meant, though, Jason. From the very beginning of this conversation, we're coming up on an hour. This is the thing that simply can no longer continue in America and think that we will be a nation of peace, a nation of rights, a nation of constitutional truth. It cannot stand if these types of breaches are not brought to full account and accountability. So if that happened to this guy, which I'm sure it did, you just said it did, and you're not a liar. I want to know what happened to him. Was he charged and was he convicted, or did they drop the charges? And then were these policemen held accountable? Was there a group of people going to them and saying, we want these guys to be reprimanded or fired? See, this is the point. If there isn't consequences, then nothing's going to change. Why would they? Why would a corrupt government stop being corrupt if nobody holds them accountable? So explain to me why we're not aggressively pursuing the law. I don't want us to go lawfare. I don't want us just to start choosing our enemies and trying to destroy them like they have done to us. It has to be legit. But if that doesn't happen, we don't have a just system. And there is no republic. We're ruled by tyrants. So I'm going to let you have the last word on how can we actually see America change, because actual people who actually do evil are actually held accountable and actually are punished. Until then, it's all just words.
Or in some of these cases that we talked about, the Democrats were shocked when the House Republicans took majority last year. They were shocked because they didn't have a budget. They were just going to tack on billions more. They were going to continue their evil stuff, programs and things that were wrong. Why? Because they had the House, the Senate, they had the Attorney General, they had the governor, and so they can continue to do things like this. Because this man, say in Dearborn, we'll use this as a scenario. The police arrest him. He makes a case. That case then goes to the Attorney General. That Attorney General buries it. The governor's not going to go after it because it aligns with their politics. And this is what we're seeing in the state and the federal level. And this is why Christians have to vote. They have to vote to put people into office like me. And then when we take back the House, the Senate, like we've had in the past, the House, the Senate, and the governor, then people like me are going to stand up to our own party and say, why is this not being done now when we have full power? And that's the way it has to be. And more men like me, and more women like me, and more men and women that share Christianity and beliefs for right, wrong, yes, no, will be able to fight back and continue to do this. And I will say this. I think a lot of the problems that people have with a Donald Trump or a Jason Woolford or a Brad Stein or you name it, is that we speak in specifics. We speak where our yes is yes and our no is no. And we live in a world now where that is foreign to people. They don't understand it. They see it as oppressive. They see it as you're violating their rights. And why? Because those are absolutes. Absolutes come from God, the God of just scales and balances. And so, brother, I'm thankful for the work that you do. I'm thankful for your show. Thank you for your comedy, for your walk with God. I'm so blessed to be on your program, and I'm looking forward to being with you and live in person one of these days.
Well, if you ever need a fundraiser, let me know, man, because I want to fight for believers that are out there doing God's work. It's a difficult challenge, but here's what I've said in the last year that I think God has caused me, because I do my job, my ministry is to the church. I'm not an evangelist. I'm going to those who go to church and claim to be believers to say it's not enough anymore to say a little prayer, go to church and think that you are one of us. It is an all in or nothing scenario that God expects of us. He even says, if you are lukewarm, he pukes. That's what God says. I want you to get all in or get all out. And we were never called to be Christians. We were called to be disciples. That's the difference. Christian means Jesus does all the work. God bless him for that, and so grateful for that incredible grace. But the real work of disciplined Christian life is the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life, because you become a servant to those who despise you. But it also changes the world. It has historically, and as long as guys like you are in office, we can have hope and optimism that it will continue in Michigan, in the United States, and ultimately in the world until Christ returns. Folks, this is Jason Woolford. If you're in Michigan, be grateful for him, pray for him, lift him up, defend him. And when you see him doing policies, get out there and partner with him so he knows he's not alone. If you're in the United States from a different state, look for more Jason Woolfords in your state to vote for. But again, as believers, we have an obligation to lift each other up and defend each other. And remember, if somebody ever says you're being politically incorrect, or if you're being non-woke, always say thank you for the compliment. That means you are actually serving the truth. And as a Christ follower, you're the last truth teller on earth. Me, I'm just a citizen. As long as they allow me, I'm going to laugh while it's legal. And I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, which is what? Putting the woke back to sleep. See you next Monday.